"Sir, leave the country now," whispered the young janitor, her trembling hand gripping his arm in the darkened corridor. Minutes before the $45 million deal that would change everything. "Let me ask you a question. How many people's lives have you unknowingly changed through a single act of kindness? And if you found out years later, would it change how you measure success? Let me know in the comments, because this story is about to explore exactly that question. Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy this story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Because tomorrow, I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one, and you don't want to miss it. Now let's begin. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a sterile glow across the empty executive hallway of Trump Tower's 42nd floor. Harry Trump stood motionless, his Italian leather shoes polished to a mirror shine against the marble flooring, his pressed charcoal suit fitting perfectly across broad shoulders earned through decades of relentless ambition. At 35, the self-made millionaire had built an empire from nothing, an artificial intelligence company that now stood on the precipice of legitimacy. Yet tonight, in this corridor he'd walked 1,000 times, something felt profoundly different. The cleaning cart clattered softly as it rolled between them, an incongruous barrier of mops and disinfectant bottles. Mira, the new janitor whose name tag he'd barely registered during the hiring process 3 weeks ago, stood before him with her dark eyes, holding an intensity that made him pause mid-breath. She couldn't have been more than 23 or 24, her navy cleaning uniform hanging loose on a petite frame, her braided hair pulled back so tightly it emphasized the sharp angles of her face. But it was her gaze, unwavering, terrified, determined, that demanded his full attention. "Sir, please," she said again, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "You need to leave the country immediately. You have maybe an hour, 2 at most. Please trust me." Her hands shook as she spoke, but her words didn't falter. There was no hesitation, no second-guessing. Only conviction. Harry set down his leather briefcase, studying her face with the discerning eye he'd honed through 4 decades of business negotiations and boardroom warfare. In all those years building his tech empire, he'd learned to read people, to distinguish the genuine from the calculated and the desperate from the theatrical. This wasn't some elaborate prank orchestrated by jealous competitors. This wasn't an actress hired to unsettle him before tomorrow's signing. The fear etched into every line of her young face was real. The tremor in her hands was authentic. Something genuinely terrifying had driven this woman to risk her employment, her reputation, everything. "What are you talking about?" he asked quietly, keeping his voice steady despite the alarm bells ringing through his nervous system. "Why would I need to leave?" Myra's eyes darted down the hallway, then back to his face. "Not here," she said urgently. "We need to go to your office. Now." As they moved quickly through the maze of cubicles and glass-walled conference rooms, the tower's nighttime skeleton crew barely glanced up from their screens, and Harry's mind raced. What could possibly warrant this level of panic from a woman he barely knew? What did she know that demanded his immediate flight from the country? 3 hours earlier, Harry had been reviewing the final contracts for the biggest acquisition of his career. A $45 million deal that would catapult his AI company into the renewable energy sector and cement his position as a visionary entrepreneur. The negotiations had consumed the last 8 months of his life, every conference call and email meticulously orchestrated toward tomorrow's signing ceremony. This deal represented more than financial victory. It represented vindication, legacy, and the fulfillment of a promise he'd made to himself years ago when his grandmother had whispered her final words to him in a hospital room. "Harry, wealth means nothing if you don't use it to lift others up." As he'd sat at his mahogany desk, reading through clauses and contingencies, his mind had drifted, as it often did, to his office's singular personal touch, a framed photograph of his grandmother taken just weeks before her death. She'd been smiling, her weathered hands folded in her lap, her eyes carrying the warmth of someone who'd spent a lifetime giving rather than taking. He'd honored that legacy quietly, anonymously, for the past decade. The past 10 years had been a master class in invisible generosity. While the financial press chronicled his company's rise, young entrepreneur disrupts AI sector. Trump Technologies goes public. Harry's real empire had been built in hospital billing departments and foster care agencies, in scholarship funds established under shell company names, and in medical bill payments made through untraceable channels. His CFO thought he was eccentric with his charitable discretionary spending. His board members assumed he had tax strategists managing write-offs. The truth was simpler and far less glamorous. Harry couldn't help himself. 3 years ago, a young black woman had been hired as a junior administrative assistant in the HR department. Mira, he recalled now, though he'd only learned her name recently when the cleaning staff roster crossed his desk during a facilities meeting. She'd worked for him for nearly 2 years before being reassigned to maintenance. A decision made by HR that he'd never questioned until tonight. But he remembered her from those early days. He remembered her because of the single conversation they'd had in the break room when she'd been crying into a paper cup of terrible office coffee. She'd apologized profusely, explaining her mother had suffered a massive stroke, that the experimental treatment wasn't covered by insurance, and that her family was facing bankruptcy. Harry had listened quietly, finished his own coffee, and left without saying anything except, "I hope your mother gets the help she needs." 2 weeks later, Harry had made a phone call to a contact at Mount Sinai Hospital. The call had resulted in a full scholarship for experimental stroke recovery treatment, a $180,000 commitment paid through a nonprofit foundation he'd established years earlier under the name New Beginnings. No one at Harry's company would ever connect the dots. Myra's family would never know the source. It was exactly as it should be. But now, 3 hours before the most important business moment of his life, that forgotten conversation had suddenly become urgent enough for a young woman to risk everything. Harry's office occupied the corner of the 42nd floor, a space that perfectly encapsulated his contradictions. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the Manhattan skyline glittering against the night sky, a testament to his empire's reach and power. Yet the furniture was deliberately understated. A simple oak desk that had belonged to his grandmother, ergonomic chairs in neutral tones, and bookshelves lined with business texts and dog-eared novels. No ego sculptures, no contemporary art installations, no monuments to his own success. The only personal items were photographs. His grandmother dominated one wall. Pictures spanning 50 years of a life dedicated to community work. Teaching in public schools, volunteering at soup kitchens, sitting bedside with dying patients who had no family. And on his desk, positioned so he saw it first thing each morning, was the most recent photograph. His grandmother at 87, her smile still radiant despite the cancer that would take her 6 months later. "Money is just energy, Harry," she'd told him during her final hospital visit, her papery hand gripping his with surprising strength. "Energy has to flow somewhere. If you hoard it, it stagnates. If you let it flow toward suffering, toward people who are drowning, then you've actually done something that matters. You've done something that echoes." Harry had spent the last decade letting his money echo. The scholarship for foster children in underserved communities, which had started 3 years ago with a $2 million endowment under a different foundation name. The medical bill assistance program his company nominally donated to his corporate charity, which he personally funded with 7 figures annually, which had begun after an employee's daughter needed heart surgery. The cybersecurity training program for at-risk youth in the Bronx. That was personal too, a quiet investment in the neighborhood where his grandmother had taught. Nobody knew the scale of it. Nobody knew that approximately 40% of his annual income, after taxes, was routed through various channels toward people he'd never meet, problems he'd never witness, and lives he'd never fully understand except through the lens of his grandmother's philosophy. Suffering was suffering, and if he had the power to ease it, the only moral choice was to do so. His colleagues thought he was brilliant in business. His competitors thought he was ruthless. His board thought he was eccentric, but profitable. None of them understood that his real obsession wasn't the acquisition deals or the market valuations. His real obsession was being worthy of the woman whose photograph sat on his desk. Tomorrow's $45 million acquisition would make him a billionaire on paper. It would cement his status as one of the youngest self-made tech moguls in America. It would fulfill every professional ambition he'd set for himself since dropping out of MIT at 19 to build his first algorithm. The renewable energy sector would finally have the AI architecture it needed to optimize wind and solar infrastructure at scale. Millions of households would save money on their energy bills. Carbon emissions would decline measurably. It was exactly the kind of legacy his grandmother would have approved of, profit with purpose. But none of that mattered if it all fell apart in the next few hours. Harry and Mira moved through the corridors in tense silence, the nighttime tower their private universe. Only a handful of junior analysts worked at this hour, their heads down, earbuds in, oblivious to the drama unfolding around them. When they reached Harry's office, he closed the door firmly and gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Sit," he said quietly, "and tell me everything." Mira remained standing, her hands wringing the strap of her cleaning supply caddy. Up close, in the soft light of his office, Harry could see the family resemblance now. She had the same bone structure as the woman in the photograph he'd glimpsed 3 years ago in that hospital break room. The same determined jaw. The same eyes that suggested a person carrying adult burdens far too young. "My brother works in IT security," she began, her voice steadier now that they were behind closed doors. "He works for Castellano Technologies. He's been there 2 years, good job, benefits, and 401k. But tonight," her voice caught slightly, "tonight he overheard something he shouldn't have." Harry felt the first genuine chill of the evening crawl down his spine. Richard Castellano, his former business partner from the early days. The man he'd partnered with to build the initial AI framework and then bought out 5 years ago when their visions had fundamentally diverged. Castellano wanted weapons applications. Harry wanted healthcare and energy solutions. The split had been contentious but clean, or so Harry had thought. What did he overhear? Harry asked, his businessman's instincts shifting into overdrive, pushing aside the confusion and focusing entirely on data collection and threat assessment. "A plan," Mira said. "A plan to destroy you." "A plan to destroy me," Harry repeated, his voice carefully neutral despite the adrenaline flooding his system. "Elaborate." Mira took a shaky breath and finally sat down, her cleaning caddy falling to the floor with a soft thud. Her fingers twisted together in her lap, a nervous habit that betrayed the composure she was trying so hard to maintain. "My mother," she began quietly, "had a stroke 3 years ago. Do you remember?" Harry's breath caught. He did remember. He remembered the break room conversation, the desperate tears, the mention of experimental treatment that insurance wouldn't cover. He remembered the exact figure she'd mentioned, $180,000, because it had haunted him for weeks afterward. He remembered making the call to Mount Sinai, establishing the foundation payment, and ensuring anonymity. But he had never confirmed that Mira was that same woman's daughter. "I remember an employee mentioning a family medical crisis," Harry said carefully. "But I'm not sure." "It was me," Mira interrupted, her eyes meeting his with sudden intensity. "I was working in HR back then, before they reassigned me to maintenance. My mother was dying. The doctors said the experimental treatment was her only chance, but it cost more than my family made in 5 years. We were looking at losing our apartment, filing bankruptcy, and everything falling apart." Her voice trembled but held steady. "And then somehow the hospital called. They said there was a foundation grant. Full coverage. No strings attached." Harry felt something shift in his chest, a recognition of consequence, of invisible threads suddenly becoming visible. "My mother recovered," Mira continued. "She's healthy now. She works as a patient advocate at Mount Sinai, helping other families navigate medical crises. She spent the last 3 years trying to find the person who paid for her treatment so she could thank them." Myra's eyes glistened. "She never found out it was you. But when I saw your name on the employee roster my second week doing maintenance, When I realized you were the founder of the company I'd just been hired to clean for, I knew. I knew it had to be you. How? Harry asked, though he already suspected the answer. Because I did research, Mira said. I looked up the foundation that paid for my mother's surgery, New Beginnings. And I found the filing paperwork. The foundation was established by you, funded by you, and it specifically identified medical assistance for employees' families as its primary mission. 3 years ago, you were the only person with the means and the access to know about my mother's situation. She leaned forward. I worked in HR. I was the one who filed the leave request when my mom had a stroke. You saw that paperwork. You knew. Harry didn't deny it. There was no point. The truth was written across both their faces. I've been waiting, Mira said softly, for 3 years to find a way to repay you, to do something that mattered, to prove that your kindness wasn't wasted on my family. She paused, her jaw tightening. And then my brother called me tonight. She pulled out her phone, her hands shaking slightly as she navigated to her voice memos app. I recorded this, she said. I didn't know what else to do with it. I was too scared to go to the police without understanding what I was dealing with. She pressed play. The audio crackled with the ambient noise of what sounded like a parking garage, the distant hum of fluorescent lights, and the echo of voices. Then Richard Castellano's voice cut through, unmistakable in its arrogant certainty. The SEC investigation will trigger tomorrow morning, right after the signing ceremony, Castellano was saying. We need the timing to be perfect. He misses the acquisition closing, the deal falls apart, and we move in with our counteroffer by the end of business. His board will be in chaos. They'll accept our lowball bid just to stop the bleeding. Another voice, older gravelly. And the planted evidence? You're certain it will hold up? For long enough, Castellano replied. We've doctored the emails and planted the financial documents in his system. We have someone inside his company ready to corroborate the story if needed. We're positioning him as selling proprietary algorithms to foreign competitors. The FBI will be too busy investigating him to notice that we're the ones who actually stole the technology. A third voice. What about the security recordings? If someone reviews the already handled, Castellano cut him off. We disabled the conference room cameras last week. Nobody knows about this plan except us. And by tomorrow night, Harry Trump will be in federal custody, his company will be in free fall, and we'll own the AI architecture that should have been ours all along. The recording ended. Harry sat in absolute silence, processing what he'd just heard. Not suspicion, not speculation, but a complete blueprint for his professional destruction, delivered in Castellano's own voice. How did you get this? Harry asked finally. I recorded it by accident, Mira said. 3 weeks ago, I was cleaning the conference room at Castellano's offices. My brother got me a temporary cleaning contract there for extra money. He didn't know why, he just helped me get the gig. I was vacuuming, and I had my phone in my apron pocket. The voice memo app was open from earlier, still recording. I didn't realize it until later when I was uploading photos for work and found the audio file. She swallowed hard. At first, I didn't understand what I was hearing. I thought it was just business talk, maybe aggressive but normal. But then my brother called tonight, panicked. He said he'd overheard more details in the office, that the SEC investigation was being triggered tomorrow, that the arrest warrant was being drawn up tonight. Your brother is in danger, Harry said immediately. If Castellano suspects. I know, Mira interrupted. That's why I came to you. My brother doesn't know I have this recording. He doesn't know I'm here. If I'm caught helping you, if this gets traced back to him, it could destroy everything for him. But, her voice grew stronger, more resolute. Good people don't deserve to suffer for other people's mistakes. You saved my mother's life when you didn't have to. You asked nothing in return. You didn't even want recognition. She stood up, her young frame seeming to grow taller, more solid with purpose. My mother always said that real wealth isn't measured in money. It's measured in how many people's lives you've touched. You touched ours. You changed ours. And I won't let corrupt people destroy the legacy of someone who chose compassion over profit. Her voice wavered slightly. So I'm risking everything to warn you. Because it's the right thing to do. Harry rose from his desk and moved to the window, looking out at the city sprawling below. Millions of lives, millions of stories, most of them intersecting with his own in ways he'd never know. Myra's mother was one of those stories. A woman he'd never met, whom he'd helped without expectation of recognition, whose daughter was now standing in his office risking everything to save him. The irony wasn't lost on him. His grandmother's philosophy about letting money echo through suffering had just saved his life. "We need to move quickly," Harry said, turning back to face Mira. "And carefully. Your brother needs to be protected. We need evidence that's undeniable. And we need federal authorities involved before Castellano moves on his plan. Would you have done what Mira did? If this story is resonating with you, please subscribe. Drop a comment. Would you risk everything to warn someone? Now, here's what Harry decides to do next. He pulled out his phone and found the contact he'd prayed never to use. Senator Patricia Williams. A woman who owed him a favor from nearly a decade ago. A favor involving a private medical situation, a discreet payment, and absolute discretion. "Senator Williams," Harry said when she answered on the second ring. "It's Harry Trump. I need your help. And I need it in the next 30 minutes. "It's nearly midnight," the senator said, clearly confused. "I know," Harry replied. "Someone's trying to frame me for securities fraud. They're trying to steal my company's proprietary technology. And there's evidence, recorded evidence, but I need federal protection before I move on it." A pause. Then, "Tell me everything." Senator Patricia Williams didn't ask questions. She never did. That was one of the reasons Harry had cultivated their relationship over nearly a decade. Her ability to move decisively in moments of crisis, asking for details only after action had been initiated. "Code word," she asked simply. "New beginnings," Harry replied. There was a pause, just long enough for recognition to register. The foundation name. The anonymous charity work. The senator had known about it all along, had quietly facilitated some of it through her political networks. She understood immediately what was at stake. "FBI Director Morrison is a personal friend," Williams said crisply. "I'm calling him now." "Where are you?" "Trump Tower, 42nd floor. My office." "Stay there. Lock the doors. Don't let anyone in except federal agents who use the code phrase New Beginnings." "Repeat it back to me." "New Beginnings," Harry confirmed. "They'll be there in 12 minutes. Director Morrison is mobilizing teams simultaneously at Castellano Technologies and 3 residential addresses. This ends tonight." The line went dead. Harry turned to find Mira standing rigid, her phone still in her hand, the weight of what they'd just set in motion visibly settling across her shoulders. The decision had been made. The machinery of federal justice was now in motion, and there was no stopping it. "Your brother," Harry said. "Does he know you're here?" "No," Mira said. "But he will soon. When the FBI shows up at Castellano's offices, when they start asking questions." She trailed off, fear flickering across her face. "He'll get immunity," Harry said with certainty. "He's a witness. He overheard the plan. That makes him valuable to the prosecution, not culpable for the crimes. As long as he cooperates fully and completely, he walks clean." Mira nodded, but the worry didn't leave her eyes. This was the price of her courage, implicating her own family, even to protect them. Harry moved to his safe, hidden behind a copy of his grandmother's favorite book, a worn edition of How to Win Friends and Influence People that had belonged to her for 50 years. He opened it and retrieved a flash drive, one he'd been keeping as insurance for exactly this kind of scenario. "I've suspected something was wrong for weeks," he said, handing the drive to Mira. "Email anomalies. Access logs that didn't match. Discrepancies in our algorithm development timeline that suggested someone was copying our work. I've been collecting evidence, not realizing how deep the conspiracy went." "What's on it?" Mira asked, taking the drive carefully, as if it might explode. "Everything," Harry replied. Electronic fund transfers between Castellano and overseas accounts. Communication logs showing technology leaks. Shipping manifests that don't match the declared cargo. Enough to prove industrial espionage on a scale that goes far beyond what you recorded in that parking garage. Myra's eyes widened. You had all this and didn't go to the authorities? I was trying to understand the full scope before I made accusations, Harry said. Trying to protect people who might have been unknowingly involved. Trying to solve it quietly before it became public scandal. He shook his head. I underestimated how dangerous Castellano had become. How desperate he was to reclaim what he thought should have been his. The building's emergency intercom crackled to life. Mr. Trump, we have federal agents in the lobby requesting access to your floor. They have credentials identifying them as. Send them up, Harry interrupted. All of them. He disconnected and looked at Mira. When they arrive, you tell them everything. You show them the recording. You explain about your brother. You cooperate completely. You understand. Yes, Mira said quietly. The next moments passed in a blur of federal authority. The office door burst open with controlled precision, FBI agents in windbreakers flooding the space with practiced efficiency. A woman in her 50s, with steel-gray eyes and the bearing of someone accustomed to command, stepped forward. Director Sarah Kowalski, FBI, she said, extending her hand to Harry. Senator Williams briefed us on the situation. We're executing coordinated search warrants at 3 locations as we speak. I need you to confirm the code phrase. New beginnings, Harry said, shaking her hand. Good, Kowalski nodded. That matches what the senator told me. Now we need that recording, and we need detailed statements from both of you about what you know and when you knew it. Mira handed over her phone, and one of the agents immediately began downloading the audio file while creating a chain of custody documentation. Another agent set up a portable recording device, and Harry found himself giving his statement. The history with Castellano, the suspected espionage, the timeline of discoveries. While Mira simultaneously gave her own account in a separate corner of the office, an agent taking notes with meticulous precision. Your brother is Marcus Chin? One of the agents asked Mira, consulting a tablet. Yes, Mira confirmed. He works in IT security at Castellano Technologies. He's being picked up right now for his protection and cooperation, the agent said. He's not under arrest. He's a key witness. Once we establish his immunity agreement, he'll be free to provide whatever information he has. Harry watched Myra's face flood with relief at this news. It took 45 minutes from the agent's arrival for the coordinated action to reach its crescendo. Director Kowalski's phone buzzed constantly, updates coming in from the field. Castellano's office has been secured, she reported. We found evidence of the algorithm theft on multiple workstations. We've got copies of the planted documents you mentioned. They were scheduled to be transferred to the SEC offices tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. Who else was involved? Harry asked. 5 conspirators, all in custody now, Kowalski said. Castellano, his CFO David Morris, his head of IT operations Linda Zhang, a freelance data specialist named Thomas Reeves, and a former employee of yours named Michael Jenkins, who was planted in your company specifically to facilitate the technology theft. Harry felt a chill. Michael Jenkins. He'd hired the man 3 years ago as a mid-level algorithm developer. He'd seemed competent, reliable, forgettable in the way of many corporate employees. And all along, he'd been a mole. The scope of this, Harry said slowly, is massive. What's one act of kindness you've done that changed someone's life? Share it in the comments below. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's the time. Let's see how this ends. Industrial espionage on a multinational scale, Kowalski confirmed. We're finding evidence that Castellano was planning to sell your AI architecture to foreign interests. Governments and private entities willing to pay premium rates for technology that took you a decade to develop. This goes beyond corporate sabotage. This is a national security issue. She turned to Mira. Your brother's information about the timing of the frame-up was critical. Without it, we would have been investigating you right now instead of pursuing the real criminals. Your warning gave us the window we needed to secure everything before evidence could be destroyed. Mira nodded, but Harry could see the exhaustion setting in, the adrenaline crash that came after crisis. She'd been running on courage and moral conviction for the past few hours. Now reality was catching up. You'll need to stay available for the investigation, Kowalski told her. Grand jury testimony will likely follow. But you're protected as a whistleblower. You did the right thing. After the agents had cleared out, taking evidence, leaving behind their preliminary reports and contact information, Harry and Mira sat in the sudden quiet of his office. The city continued its sleepless rhythm outside the windows. The clock on his desk read 1:47 a.m. The acquisition, Harry said. It closes in, he checked his email, 17 hours. Now that the conspiracy is exposed, now that the evidence is secured. It goes forward, Mira finished. Unchanged. Changed, actually, Harry corrected. Better. Because now my company isn't tainted by suspicion. Now there's a public narrative that protects everyone involved. We're the victims of corporate espionage, not the perpetrators. The board will feel vindicated. The acquiring company will feel they're making the right choice. He paused. And my technology won't be stolen by criminals. It will be used to build clean energy infrastructure. He looked at Mira, really looked at her. This young woman who'd risked everything on moral conviction. Thank you, Harry said simply. You didn't have to do this. You could have ignored what you knew. You could have protected your brother by staying silent. But you chose courage instead. My mother always said, Mira replied, echoing words from their first conversation, that real wealth isn't money. It's the people whose lives you change. You changed my mother's life. You changed my life. I couldn't let them destroy that by destroying you. She stood up, straightening her cleaning uniform with a small, rueful smile. I should probably go home. Try to sleep before everything hits the news. There's a car waiting downstairs, Harry said. FBI's providing security for you and your brother until this is fully resolved. Go home. Rest. And Mira, he paused, don't clean this office tomorrow. You're not a janitor anymore. Not if you don't want to be. Myra's eyes glistened. What do you mean? I mean that when this is over, when the dust settles, I want you to come work for me. Officially. In our compliance department. We're going to need someone who understands the importance of ethics, of integrity, of doing the right thing even when it's hard. Harry smiled. Someone who honors the legacy of people like your mother. Like my grandmother. Like the best parts of all of us. Mira left his office at 2:15 a.m., protected by federal agents, her phone already buzzing with calls from her panicked brother. Harry remained at his window, watching the city transform from night to early morning light. In a few hours, his phone would ring with board members' questions. In a few more hours, his $45 million acquisition would close. In a few days, the news would break, the conspiracy, the arrests, the national security implications. But for now, in this quiet moment before the chaos, Harry thought of his grandmother. He thought of the recording in Myra's phone. He thought of invisible threads of kindness connecting across years and circumstances, creating the most unexpected salvation. True wealth, he realized, wasn't measured in the deals you closed. It was measured in the people you touched. 2 years later, the auditorium of Mount Sinai Hospital was filled to capacity. The Harry Trump Medical Fund for Families in Crisis dedication ceremony had drawn an unexpected crowd. Not just the board members and donors Harry had anticipated, but hundreds of families. People whose medical emergencies had been covered by the fund's quiet interventions. People whose dignity had been preserved when financial ruin seemed inevitable. People whose lives had been touched by an act of anonymous kindness and had come to bear witness to its public recognition. Harry sat in the front row, watching the stage with a mixture of pride and humility. The $45 million acquisition had closed successfully 2 years ago, as promised. His AI technology had become the backbone of renewable energy infrastructure across the northeastern United States. But more significantly, far more significantly, his algorithms had been adapted for medical applications. early detection systems for cancers, cardiac conditions, and neurological diseases. The technology now saved thousands of lives annually, catching illnesses in their earliest, most treatable stages. His grandmother would have been proud. But what filled Harry with the deepest satisfaction wasn't the business success or the technological advancement. It was Mira, stepping onto the stage in professional attire, a navy blazer and cream blouse, her hair styled with elegant simplicity, carrying herself with the confidence of someone who'd discovered her true calling. "Good evening," Mira said into the microphone, her voice steady and clear. "My name is Mira Chen, and I'm the Director of Corporate Ethics at Trump Technologies. 2 years ago, I was a janitor cleaning offices at night while attending community college during the day. I had no idea that my life was about to change in ways I couldn't have imagined." She paused, looking out at the audience with the same fierce intensity Harry remembered from that night in the office corridor. "Most of you know the headlines," Mira continued. "You know about the corporate conspiracy, the FBI investigation, the arrests. What you might not know is the reason I risked everything to expose that conspiracy. It wasn't because I was brave. It wasn't because I understood the legal implications or the national security ramifications." She gestured toward the back of the auditorium. "It was because standing in that office with Harry Trump, I realized that good people don't deserve to suffer for other people's mistakes. And I couldn't let that happen to someone who'd already given so much." Harry felt several eyes in the audience turn toward him. He kept his gaze on Mira, letting her have this moment. 3 years before that night," Mira said, "my mother suffered a massive stroke. Our family was facing financial devastation, medical bills we couldn't pay, a future that looked like bankruptcy and loss of our home. And then, somehow, a foundation stepped in, quietly, anonymously. They paid for experimental treatment that saved my mother's life. They asked for nothing in return. They wanted no recognition." Myra's voice grew stronger, more emotional. "It took me years to realize that person was Harry Trump. That the man who signed my paychecks, who barely knew my name, had already changed my family's life in ways we couldn't fully comprehend. That's the kind of person I found myself protecting that night 2 years ago. Not a billionaire. Not a tech mogul. A human being who genuinely believed that wealth means nothing if you don't use it to lift others up." She turned to look directly at Harry. "Over the past 2 years, I've worked in his company's compliance and ethics department. I've helped implement policies that prioritize integrity over profit. I've helped ensure that the technology we build serves humanity, not just shareholders. And I've watched Harry expand his medical fund exponentially, creating a system that now helps over 500 families annually." Mira smiled. "He still does it mostly anonymously. I only know because I work for him. Most of the families helped by this fund will never know their benefactor's name. And he prefers it that way." The audience began to applaud, but Mira raised her hand gently, asking for quiet. "I'm here tonight because I want to say something publicly that I've said to Harry privately many times," Mira said. "Thank you. Thank you for teaching me that courage isn't about being fearless. It's about doing the right thing even when you're terrified. Thank you for showing me that success isn't measured in acquisition deals or net worth, but in the lives you touch and the legacy you leave. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to spend my career ensuring that more people like my mother get the help they deserve when they need it most." She stepped back from the microphone, and the auditorium erupted in standing ovation. Harry's eyes were wet. After the formal ceremony concluded, after the speeches from hospital administrators and medical professionals had been delivered, the audience mingled in the reception hall. Harry found himself surrounded by grateful families. People whose children had received treatment, whose parents had been saved from financial ruin, whose lives had been restored by the fund's interventions. Then he saw her. Myra's mother moved through the crowd with the assured grace of someone who'd reclaimed her life. She wore a hospital badge, her position as a patient advocate now official and visible. When she spotted Harry, her face transformed with recognition and emotion. "Mr. Trump," she said, reaching him and taking both his hands in hers. I finally get to thank you face to face. Please, Harry said, gently squeezing her hands. Just Harry. Harry, she repeated, tears streaming down her face. You saved more than my life that day. You saved my family's dignity. You kept us housed. You kept us together. And more than that, you inspired my daughter to dedicate her life to helping others navigate exactly what we went through. She embraced him, and Harry held her, understanding the weight of gratitude that had been waiting 3 years for this moment. When they separated, Myra's mother smiled through her tears. Do you know what Mira told me when she was offered the job in your compliance department? Her mother asked. She said, Mom, I'm going to make sure that what Harry did for us, he can do for thousands of people, but with the protection of ethics and integrity built into the system. That's how she thinks now. That's how you've changed her. Harry glanced across the room, where Mira was speaking with a group of families, her face animated with genuine connection and purpose. She changed herself, Harry said quietly. I just provided the opportunity. Later that evening, as the crowd dispersed and the auditorium emptied, Harry stood alone on the stage, looking out at the rows of empty seats. His phone buzzed with a message from his chief technology officer. Early detection algorithm for pancreatic cancer just received FDA approval. Projected to save 8,000 lives annually. 8,000 lives. Harry thought about his grandmother. How she'd spent her entire life trying to ease suffering in small ways, never knowing the ultimate impact of her example. He thought about Myra's mother, recovering in a hospital bed, never knowing that her desperate situation had prompted a cascade of consequences that would ripple outward for years. He thought about Myra's brother, Marcus, who'd used his immunity agreement to start a cybersecurity firm specializing in protecting whistleblowers and ethical employees from corporate retaliation. The firm was thriving, helping dozens of people every year find the courage to report wrongdoing without fear of professional destruction. One act of kindness. One anonymous payment for one woman's medical treatment. One moment of choosing compassion over isolation. And from that single seed, an entire forest of positive consequences had grown. A forest that was still growing, still expanding, still touching lives in ways Harry would never fully understand. This was the true wealth his grandmother had spoken of. Not the billions in his bank account. Not the technology valued by markets and investors. But the invisible impact, the ripple effects, the cascading consequences of choosing to use resources, not for personal gain, but for human dignity. Harry thought of the thousands of families helped by his medical fund. The millions who would benefit from early detection algorithms. The countless employees now working in an organization where ethics wasn't just a policy, but a lived value, because Mira had shown that integrity was worth risking everything for. This was legacy. This was true wealth. As Harry left the auditorium and stepped into the cool night air of Manhattan, he pulled out his phone and initiated a transfer, another anonymous contribution to the medical fund. This one was substantial enough to expand operations to 3 new cities. It felt like the right thing to do. Somewhere, he imagined his grandmother was smiling. And that's the story of how one act of anonymous kindness, one decision to help a stranger without asking for recognition, created a ripple effect that saved a company, protected whistleblowers, transformed lives, and ultimately saved thousands of people through medical technology. But here's what I want you to take away from this. You don't need to be a billionaire to create that kind of impact. You don't need to be famous or powerful. You just need to be willing to help when you see someone suffering, without keeping score of what you'll get in return. I'm curious, what did this story make you feel? Did it inspire you? Did it make you think differently about success and legacy? Leave a comment below and tell me which moment resonated with you most. Was it Myra's courage? Harry's quiet generosity? The moment his grandmother's values came full circle?
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazy and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.